Good morning, everybody. How are you? It's good to see you this morning. I've already got Terry and Rafa and Rick. I see you guys in the chat. I do that every time. I have my speakers on while I turn on. Good to see y'all. Happy Sunday. Has it been a big week? It's been a week for me, same as normal. Not too much out of the ordinary. I hope you guys are doing great. Stacia, good morning to you. Good to see you. All right, well let's start thinking about topics, guys. I do have some on the list from last week, but I would like to pretend for a few minutes that those don't exist and just get you guys input. If there's something specific you want to do today, I definitely want to hear about that before we make a decision on where we're going to go today. Yes, Rick, storm clouds above the fall trees. Yeah, the picture kind of made me think of the weather where I am today, so it seemed appropriate. Not quite that ominous looking. Oh man, might get some rain today though. We'll see. I'm doing a little planting. I looked this year late in the fall at what crops can you start growing in the fall? Because I'm trying to try my hand at growing. I've done it a little bit here and there in the past, but I thought this fall I'd try to start some fall plants, some fall vegetables. And I'm so, I'm not very experienced at this, so it's been interesting. And I have some seedlings now that I've grown. They're a few inches tall, and I'm about to start planting them outside. I've been kind of moving them in and outside to get them used to the weather and let them grow a little bit and get some sunshine and all that. But they're there. So I have some peas specifically and some spinach that I want to get out there and see if it'll keep growing outside. I got to get them transplanted. But anyway, that's something little project I'm working on. It just gives me a little peace and joy to just try to get some plants to grow. Katie Turner and your mom, good morning to you guys. And C. Jones and Charles Pascal, good morning to you, sirs. It's good to have you. But yeah, go ahead and think about any topics you guys want to talk about. I do have a few here, but let me hear what you guys are thinking about this week. Squiffy Bear, you mentioned who is the disciple that Jesus loved. Okay, I'll put that on here. I'm assuming that's a topic you want to discuss. And Squiffy, I may be misunderstanding, but I thought that was pretty clear in the scripture. Is it not? Is there something we need to discover there? Just put a little more detail maybe if you think so. We can definitely hit it though. Armored Raven, good morning, sir. Good to have you. Stacia, you said you're growing an avocado tree from a seed. Yeah, I've got one in there that I saved. And I was thinking about trying to grow it, but yeah, I don't know if this is the best time of year to start that tree. So I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what to do with that seed. I've seen how you're supposed to start it. You use toothpicks and you put it on top of a cup full of water or something. I can't. It seems complicated. But I would love an avocado tree. Oh my goodness, that'd be awesome. Not sure this is the best, where I live is the best place to grow it though. I don't know. We'll have to see. Yeah, it's good to see you guys this morning. Thank you for joining. Now I got a few streaming in. Katie said, I think that Nineveh primarily worshiped fish gods, which would explain why God had Jonah eaten by a fish. Yes, Katie. And your little prompting this week, by the way, had me look into that specific pagan god Dagon that you sent to me. And And I did look at that and looked at the fish motif for that god. It's interesting that Dagon was a god of agriculture. However, he somehow they gave him, or he got this notoriety for a fish, form. And it's interesting that that is the case. But yeah, you're right. The interesting thing is that if he was a fish type of god, half man, half fish, or whatever they thought he was, then the fact that Jonah had been in the belly of a fish for 3 days and nights and then came to prophesy to the people of Nineveh would have given him some sort of credibility, wouldn't it? Especially if they knew that that had happened, right? So yeah, very interesting. Very interesting there. Sam Big, good morning to you. Happy Sunday to you too, sir. Thank you for joining this morning. Stacia, in regards to your avocado growing, you said yours sits on the sink. It's super easy, but requires a lot of patience. Yes, patience. That's a good thing. I need more patience. I need to do things that make me more patient. Maybe I just need to start mine and see where it goes. Just have fun with it. That's probably what I need to do. Good morning to everyone. Thank you guys again for joining. Okay, well, since you're not throwing many topics out, I'll show you the list. I'll show you the list we've got. All right, so let's see here. And again, let me know if there's anything at all wrong with the stream. Just want to make sure that I don't have any problems here. Sometimes stuff's happening and I don't know it, so just let me know. But we'll see here. Let me double check. Yep. Okay. Got rumbles moving forward. Everything seems in order here. Everything's in order. All right, here's the list I've got this week so far. Some of these are holdovers. Most of these. I added this one myself, and I did it yesterday because I was studying some things, and I had known about Albert Pike's plan for 3 world wars, a Masonic plan for 3 world wars for a long time, but I read the little excerpt of his letter about the 3rd World War and thought it was pertinent. I thought maybe we could read that together and look at it, talk a little bit about that. So I just put that on there as a Bible Scribe bonus. Stacia, last week you asked, what did Christ really mean when he says, when 2 or 3 are gathered, I am there? And in contrast, he also says he doesn't dwell in a temple made with human hands. Could this be why the church feels empty? So I was going to do that this week. Rafa, you asked my take on AI. Are there demons behind it, like with aliens? And so I will definitely answer that question today. Karen Morgan last week asked, do you think visions and dreams and the prophetic is in our season? And I came up with this scripture that I do want to go to in part of that discussion. So I will answer this one today, Karen, for you. And the Squiffy Bear, yours just now, that is, who is the disciple that Jesus loved? And you said you were reading the book of John and it wasn't totally clear to you. Plus you couldn't understand why they make a point stating this disciple is loved. If you've covered it, no worries. No, that's fine. I just wanted to know the context, and that gives me exactly what I needed to understand where you're coming from. You know, there was a time, was it last week or the week before, where I think it was Rick, your question. I totally misinterpreted your question a little bit based on my own preconceptions. So I tried hard not to do that. I want to answer you guys' questions from your perspectives. And make sure I understand that. So it's good to get that extra there, Squiffy. Thank you. Rafa, you asked if I had read the book or letter of Jude. Very clear with references to Enoch and the fallen angels. Yes, I have definitely read Jude a number of times. And yes, it does reference Enoch and the fallen angels. That whole story is very clear in there. Very clearly referenced. Terry, you say, what language did Jesus speak to his disciples? Jerusalem was under Roman occupation. Wouldn't it be Greek or Hebrew? Yeah, Terry. I don't know if you want that to be a topic, but I can briefly answer that the spoken language in the area of the world they were in was Greek because of the Roman occupation, because it was the language of Rome. And so it would definitely be not Hebrew. Okay, Hebrew is actually old, and the Jews didn't even speak it anymore. That's why the Septuagint had been written in Greek. That was the Greek copy of the Hebrew scriptures. So then, at the time of Christ, there's two possibilities. Either they spoke Greek to each other, just as they wrote the books, or they could have possibly spoken Aramaic in some regard, which is a derivation essentially of Hebrew. So I'm not 100% sure what they spoke. My guess is that it would have been Greek, because that was the language of commerce and the language of the nation. And so that's my guess. But there is some speculation on what they actually spoke. They obviously wrote in Greek. Sam Big, you asked, what do I think about the first book of Adam and Eve? Is it real? Can we trust it? Sam Big, yes. I'm trying to decide whether I want to make that a topic or just answer you right out. I think I'll just try to answer you, Sam, and because generally I trust it to a point. I think it is definitely a writing that existed long before the copies that we have were found. So they'll say, when you look at the first book of Adam and Eve, and you look at, well, when did we find it? When was it discovered? Where were the writings? They'll date it to like I don't remember, 7th, 8th century AD or something like that, because that's when they found the copies that they have for what we read. But there's scholars that look at that, and they look at the text and what's in it, and they say this must have been from an ancient Hebrew text. It had to be. So there's a lot of scholars that say, yeah, we got copies from that time period, but it's definitely copies of an older Hebrew text. Definitely. Okay, that's just how they say it. And so, in fact, most of the scholars, if I remember correctly, think it's older. They just don't know. Okay, they just say, we don't know. The copies we have are from, 7th century, 8th century, whatever. So, in that regard, I have to take it at its word and kind of evaluate it against the Bible and other texts. So that's exactly what I do. I think it's very valuable, and I see actually some of the things in it echoed in other texts. So that gives it credibility to me. So while I wouldn't say you should hard and fast believe every word in that writing, you should definitely read that writing, because it has context that fits in with the scriptures, and it fits in with all these other ancient writings, and it tells us a bigger picture of the story of Adam and Eve specifically that opens your eyes. It gives you information that we didn't have before, and it definitely has no Gnostic overtones. So I would not consider it a Gnostic or Hermetic text in any sense. It has Hebrew overtones. So if that helps in your thought pattern of the writing, the first book of Adam and Eve, I think it's real. Who knows about the reliability of the copy we've got? Seems pretty good, but we don't have anything to compare it to. So that's how I feel about that writing. I guess that's enough, I'll say. But yeah, I definitely love that writing. I love studying it and reading it. I think it's very valuable to Christianity in general, and to Judaism. It's very valuable to know. So anyway, Rafa, you mentioned, related to the 3 world wars, there was also a declaration, maybe from Netanyahu, of peace and safety and security. Instead, war would come upon them, which is in the Bible. Plan to match scriptures. Yeah, well, I don't know exactly how I would answer you, Rafa, in that, but I would say that there does seem to be out there in general by the people that pull the strings in different countries around the world. There seems to be an agenda to fulfill what people conceive as Bible prophecy in the end times. Mostly has to do with Zionism and a futurist dispensational mentality of prophecy concerning Antichrist, concerning wars, concerning tribulation, concerning the third temple mostly. Okay, so that's why, because it's so focused on some of those things, you can see where that comes from, right? It comes from an agenda, a place, a certain group of people that want people to connect world events with those things. And so I typically, I'll leave that one right there. All right, guys. I guess we'll get started with whatever I've got here for announcements in the way of this week. I did study more on the pagan gods. I'm close to getting a video together on this. And so it's a very deep chasm I've jumped into, and I'm crawling my way out slowly but surely. I am finding what I thought I would find, which is a connection between the deities of all the nations of the ancient world, straight from Sumeria, Babylonia, Canaan, to Egypt, to Babylon, to Persia, and then Greece and Rome. And so I expect to have a video soon on that progression of those pagan gods through all those cultures. And so, yeah, be on the lookout for that. Now, I do have a new video coming out today. Video release today. And the name of the video is... Did I name it? Yes, I did name it. Why do I believe that Satanists rule the world? So that's the name of the video that's coming out today. And the video is an answer to a question by one of you guys. One of y'all emailed me and asked me this question. You asked, how do you know, Bible scribe, how do you know that Satanists rule the world, or that there's all this like sacrificing and pedophilia going on? How do you know that? Because this person was like, well, I know there's corruption, but I have a hard time finding or understanding why people would think that Satanists rule the world, that it's all corrupt and it's just ubiquitous. And so the only way I figured in my head to answer the question was to answer it from the standpoint of what really did convince me that might be the case. And so this video is essentially an anthology of different evidence that is out there. That's not mine. It's out there that the rulers of the world essentially they align themselves with the Luciferian satanic worldview. And the video, running about an hour and 10 minutes, only scratches the surface, really. It only scratches the surface, which is amazing. It's not the kind of video I like to make, too. It's kind of somber and horrible, right? So I'm looking forward to the pagan gods video because it won't be that topic. I'm really tired of the satanic topic. Really just worn out with it. Worn out with that whole, with them. I'm worn out with them. But that's going to come out very soon after we're done with our live stream today. I almost had it scheduled this morning, and then I realized I want to shift something in it. I want to update something that I forgot to do. And I'll republish that, but it'll be out this afternoon. So just be aware that's coming. The website and the app has been, I'm not really making many updates on the app, but the website, I am putting more research on this. And so it's starting to grow. And as I really get more in there, I'm going to announce more about what's on the website, so you're aware how much research and information is getting put on there. One thing that I think is interesting that I've been working on a little bit, I do want to show you this real quick. I've been working on this. You guys have seen my old videos probably on the timelines surrounding the years 70 AD, right? But this is now getting expanded, and I've expanded it severely because of my Roman research. And so you can see now I'm even going back as far as 15 AD, where there was a famine in Rome, and Augustus expelled the slaves and gladiators and foreigners, including the Jews, out of Rome. And then the Temple of Janus in 15 AD was opened by Augustus. You know what the god Janus is? It's a god of cosmic transition. And it's interesting. It's interesting that the Temple of Janus, opened by Caesar Augustus in 15 AD. Oh, what else happened to Janus? Well, after Titan and Vespasian destroyed Jerusalem, they then closed the Temple of Janus, the god of transition. So it's just amazing that that lines up with what God was doing in this time period. Did they know? Did they just, did they not know? Were they ignorant, but they just did these things and God had his hand in it? So some of this stuff, this new timeline has grown by leaps and bounds. I have a lot of Jewish infractions here, times when Jews were expelled from Rome, the integration of the Christians into Rome once Peter started the church there, and what happened. And then when did God send plagues on Rome? It seemed to be right after Rome would do something horrible to the Christians. That's the stuff I'm finding now, that this whole epic story of what God did in the first century between God, the Christians, the Jews, and the Romans, it is amazing. And it is so just multifaceted. Definitely just continues to grow my awe of what God did in the time period. So at some point, I'm going to probably do another video on this timeline that will expand it way beyond anything I've ever seen online, and beyond what I did in the past, which, by the way, my original timeline of 70 AD video is still like my most popular video right now. And there's even now hundreds of people seeing that thing all the time. I'm just amazed that God's changing people's minds about things, helping them to discover a little more about their history. So it's very interesting, very, very fun. All right, so that's what I've been working on in addition to everything else. So I think with that, we can get started this morning on our topics. As far as order here, let's see. Sam Big, I answered your question on that book of Adam and Eve, so I'll just take that off. Let's see. I like ending up on conspiracy stuff, which, I only say that tongue in cheek because I don't consider most of those things conspiracies. I think this looks like a pretty good order. So Stacia, we can start with yours today. Let me put this on. And 2 or 3 are gathered. That is our topic to start with. All right. So let me get the verse that is in question up on the screen for this. Matthew 18:20. Okay, let's see here. Matthew 18, verse 20. All right. What is the context here? Who is Jesus talking to? At the time, the disciples came to Jesus saying, "Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" And Jesus called a little child to him and set him in the midst, and said, "Except you be converted and become as little children, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven." That's an interesting diversion, misdirection. They ask Jesus, who's the greatest in the kingdom? And he brings the child out and says, well, if you're not converted like a child, you won't even enter it. So whoever therefore shall humble himself as the child, the same is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Deborah Miller, good morning. I see you on there. So he's saying you have to be humble. The greatest in heaven is not the one really who asks, apparently. The one who asks may not end up being the greatest. It's the most humble as the child. So he talks about the children. Whoever offends one of these, it would be better if you were killed. Woe unto the world because of offenses, because it needs that offenses come, but woe to the man by whom it comes. This is interesting in the context of the time they were in for him to say this, that yes, there are offenses in the world, meaning there's going to be strife, struggles, but he's saying don't be the one through which those struggles come, because it's a woe to that man. Okay, that's interesting. So no matter, I guess this maybe applies to even our time, there may be horrible things going on in the world, but don't become a part of it, because it is much worse for you if you become a part of it. Interesting statement to think about. Verse 8 is where he says, if your hand or foot offends you, cut it off. It's better to you not to have the hand than to be cast into everlasting fire for your wickedness. If your eye offends you, pluck it out. Despise not the children, for I say that in heaven their angels do always behold the face of my Father in heaven. For the Son of Man has come to save that which is lost. If a man has 100 sheep and one goes astray, he leaves the 99 and seeks that which is astray. All right. The will of your Father in heaven, these little ones. So this whole first section has been about children and the humbleness and the position and standing of children in the kingdom of heaven. So interesting. Moreover, if your brother trespasses you, go and tell him his fault. And if he will not hear you, take with thee 1 or 2 more. And if he neglects, tell it to the church, and then he may be cast out. So that was church discipline. And whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Don't forget, he's talking to the disciples here. We just need to remember that. If 2 of you, okay, this is the section that it's in. Verily I say to you, whatsoever ye bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. And again I say to you, if 2 of you shall agree on earth as touching anything they shall ask, it shall be done for them of my Father which is in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst of them. Interesting. Then Peter comes and says, Lord, if my brother sins against me, how shall I forgive him? 7 times. And that so goes on into another different discussion, but still about the kingdom of heaven. So I think it's these 3 verses. It's verse 18, 19, and 20 in Matthew chapter 18 that talk about this. And this section that says, for where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them. So, let's see, was it Stacia? Yeah. Stacia, I'm trying to think through this and discuss it rationally. But this is one of those things I would not immediately take and apply to myself in the current time. Not saying we shouldn't at least consider it, but it was, for one, said to the disciples in a passage that's talking about binding things on earth and in heaven. Essentially, that has to do with spiritual and demonic activity. And so they're talking here about the binding and loosing of demons and the power that's essentially given over. And Christ specifically gave power to the disciples in this time. He had this whole, and this might be part of the same discussion with them, where he's saying, you'll cast out demons, you're going to heal people, you're going to do all these things. He's sitting down with his 12 and he's telling them that. It's not, he's not telling the whole world ad nauseum, but of course then after all this, He sends the Comforter, the Holy Spirit, at his ascension. He sends the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit, again, gives Christianity the power to do some of these things. Okay? So that's all very interesting. I guess this passage, like, to me, again, I can only say that I would not necessarily always apply these 3 verses to myself because of who it was said to and the time it was said in. But where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there am I in the midst of them. He says this as part of this. You're going to bind things on earth and loose them, and bind them in heaven and loose them. And if 2 of you agree, 2 of you, meaning the disciples, agree on earth as touching anything that they will ask, it'll be done for them. So, this is the kind of thing that I think it's talking about, like someone's asking for a healing or asking for something to be done for them. And if the 2 of you agree, it's going to happen, he says. Then he says, for where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst of them. So it, again, feels kind of like this is part of that directive to the disciples to go out and do these things. And I just have a hard time applying that stuff directly to myself right now. And just realize, too, that he's not giving verse 20 necessarily as a prescription for it's not a prescription for a spell, right? He's not saying, hey, if 2 of you get together, I'm there, and then you can do the things. He's saying this to say that he's saying the disciples, you've got power, and you definitely have power if you 2 agree. If 2 of you agree on it, my Father's going to do the thing. And by explanation, he says, for where 2 of you are gathered, there I am in the midst. So I don't know if I'm making sense in explaining it, but I do feel like it's one of those things. Now, when 2 Christians get together and pray, do you think God's not in the midst of that? Like, I'm not arguing against that, okay? I mean, that's the whole point. Like, does he not hear you? Yeah, he does. Yeah. And I'm just trying to be careful with it. That's all. I don't know if this was given as a rule that we can then apply for all time and eternity, right? I don't know. But it does sound like he's saying that to the disciples in terms of this binding and loosing that they're going to be doing, whatever that is, and granting requests that people have of them, saying that it would be done for them. So maybe that answers you, Stacia. That's kind of a cop-out, isn't it? Someone on the live stream wants me to say, yes, if 2 people are together today, then God is in the midst and they can bind and loose things on earth, right? I don't know. To me, I'm more inclined to definitely gather with my fellow believers and pray over items, pray for things, ask him to intervene in situations, rather than assuming I have this power that was directed through the disciples at the time of Christ, 1,000 and 1,500, almost 2,000 years ago. So, do you see where I'm coming from on that? And maybe I'm just too conservative about it. Maybe I'm too careful about it. Maybe I should be more like, hey, hey, bud, my fellow Christian brother, let's go over and let's go walk down Main Street, USA, and start healing people together, because when 2 of us are gathered, God's in the midst, right? Should I do that? I don't know. That that seems a little bit more about me than it does about God. I don't know. There's probably some on this live stream listening that will listen to this, that will say, yeah, you need to do that. That's what you're supposed to do. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm just, that's not my strength, but that is someone else's strength. And if that's the case, then so be it. Amen. But I am doing what my strength is, I think. I am trying to capitalize on what God's given me. So to me, that's not a problem for me at all. And anyway, I hope that answers a little bit. Now, there was more to your question, Stacia. You said also, in contrast, he also says he doesn't dwell in a temple made with human hands. Yes. And I believe that statement, Stacia, that he said, I don't dwell in a temple made with human hands. He's talking in that, I think that's about, I think that's in Hebrews, if I'm not mistaken, or, well, at least there's discussion of it there. But yeah, when he says that, I believe he's instead saying, no, my dwelling place is in heaven. It's beside the Father. There's this whole thing of, the throne of God being on Zion in heaven and all this other stuff. And the temple on earth was never a replacement. It was a shadow of what's in heaven. It was a shadow. And so I think that statement is about that. He's saying, I don't dwell in the temples made with human hands. I don't dwell in the temple in Jerusalem. I don't dwell, in Solomon's temple or Herod's temple. And I definitely don't dwell in the third temple. Whenever that comes, if it's coming. But he's saying, I dwell in heaven with my Father. And then, Stacia, your last part there was, could this be why the church feels so empty? And I don't know if you mean empty in the sense of people not being there, or you mean generally like emotionally empty, kind of like psychologically empty feeling. Or the practice of church feels empty. But maybe. I mean, maybe it's that because of our misunderstanding of the scripture and our application of things that don't belong to us, to ourselves, right? Like people taking the passages about those specific instructions to the disciples. When Christ says to them, you will take up serpents and not be bit. And then churches, churches in rural America take up serpents and carry them around, and then sooner or later someone gets bit. Perhaps there was a misapplication of the scriptures there. Perhaps. Of course, they would say, well, that person may have had a moment of lack of faith. So they got bit. I don't know. But that's kind of silly, I think. And maybe you're right, Stacia. Maybe this could be contributing factor to the kind of hollowness of church for a lot of people. That the misinterpretation, the misrepresentation of Scripture and what it really has talked about is so vast that it's hard for us to get past that now when we're in the church and hearing those same things said again and again that are just not right. And we know it, and we can see it in the Scripture now. It's hard to deal with that and then give them credibility on other things that they're teaching, right? So for instance, on that passage we just went to, Matthew 18, I literally said to you, I'm saying I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's this. And that honesty is different than what you see in the church. In the church, you get a directive. I know, and this is what it is, generally speaking. I mean, there's some pastors who are sensitive on those things, but then they'll say, this is what it is, and it's no other thing, right? And so then you're left with, well, if you find out something that's contrary to that, then how do you reconcile? You feel like there's no credibility in the pulpit, right? So I think you may be onto something, Stacia. And I just want to say one thing, Stacia. Don't be bitter. Don't let it make you bitter. To me, there's some bitterness there for me towards the church in general, but also in general, I also feel for the people in the church. I'm worried for them, because the blindness is palpable. The blindness is there, and not that I've got everything right, but enough that I recognize the problems, right? I recognize the problems, and there's so many problems, and there's so little attention to those problems that you feel kind of like despair in the church, right? You feel a little bit of despair. And yeah, Stacia, you say they don't like questions that oppose their education, right? They go to a seminary and they're told all these things, and then I don't know whether they're taught to be that way, to be like no, it's my way. I mean, I know the things because I went to the seminary. I don't know if they're taught to be that way, but they come out acting that way. I had an experience a long time ago. I think I was still in high school, but I think I was the summer before I went to college. And I was in a Sunday school class that was being taught by a college student. And again, you can ask yourself, why is a college student teaching in the church? But this college student was a seminary student. And of course, they loved that. So they gave him a class. And I'm in this class, and I called him out on a piece of scripture even at that time at age, 17, 18. And I knew I was right. Like, I knew I was right about this piece of scripture. And he tore me up in the class in front of everybody. He's like, no, you're wrong. It's this, it's this, it's this. And I just, I was I'm a mild kind of mannered person. I didn't kick back or fight with him. Nowadays I would have, but then I was a little, more soft-spoken. But I left that class so just distraught and amazed that, he thought he knew everything about the scripture he was probably a 20-year-old, who had just been in seminary, a couple years. It's like, what? So crazy that it's that way, that that pride is so hard to deal with. Terry Barnes, you say you just have to shine your light brighter in church. It's a hospital for the soul for most. Yeah, I agree, Terry. And if you can do that, see, that's what I would encourage. If you can do that and you can go into the church and be the light that the church needs, look at it as a mission field, then do that, because it would be so good if we can reform the church from within and change it. But I'm not sure that I feel that's 100% possible. But being that to the people in the church, it's the people that matter, right? So Terry, I like your comment. I like the way you said that. And just realize that even some of the ignorant aspects of Christianity today, even some of the things though are still good for people. There's just good things happening too. It's not all bad. And a person coming into the church, especially from a non-Christian background, may get things there still, even in today's church, that they need in the terms of love, care, guidance, at least an attention to the scriptures and to the beginnings of learning, right? And so in that way, maybe the church still has a place, but I do think that... I think in time something different is going to come. I don't know how to say that any other way, but I think something different is going to come. Tanda, you said, yes, I was told by graduates that they would hear other views out there and they would not listen to it. Yeah. Or they were not to listen to it. Like they were told not to listen to it. Interesting. Sam Big, you said the Jezebel spirit, do you think it is still here on earth? Sam, that's a big question. It's probably something, Sam, I would want to look at a little deeper. I'm not real familiar with the Jezebel, quote, Jezebel spirit. I think it's something I would have to really answer well. I would have to do some looking on that. All right. So, Stacia, I think that's a pretty good answer. At least that's what I've got for now on your question about those passages and everything. You do comment here. You say, Stacia, that you were warned not to share your thoughts or beliefs. That's why you left. We are all there to examine, yet no examination takes place. Yeah. Well, I'm very sorry that happened. I mean, it's not easy to be in there and be... It's not easy to be in there and deal with that and come away without letting the emotions of that affect you, and it's not for everybody to be in the church. I'm just saying, that's why I think that it's going to be really hard. That's one of the things that's going to be hard to remedy in the church is the church has bound itself, for one, to the government. They've bound themselves to the government with the 501c3 organization claim and taxes, and all of this other stuff. So the liability there is control. It's control. And I don't understand. I don't see how the church can reform if that never changes. If that never changes, I don't understand how the church can reform itself. And I also don't understand it. I don't think the churches can reform themselves if they don't unshackle themselves from the big organizations, the denominational organizations. I think those are levers of control that are, again, stifling what should be happening in the church. So they stifle through doctrine, through this, through that, and all this other stuff. So I think there are some big roadblocks to the reform of the Christian church in the modern time. Maybe they can be done away with. I don't know. I don't see how that will happen, but maybe. Laura Masood, welcome this morning. It's good to have you. You said, thank you that you said where two or more come together that you are here. And you invite us to come boldly to your throne of grace to receive mercy and help in our time of need. I start my prayers with another person using those scriptures. Excellent, Laura. And like I said, you may have missed it, but I do. It's not that I don't believe God's in the midst of two people gathering together. In fact, I think he's in the midst of one person who's truly devoted to him, who's praying fervently and sincerely to him. I think he hears that. Like, I don't know what other thing people are expecting to happen, right? So I agree with that prayer, and I don't have a problem with that at all. Stacia, you said, I just focus on loving my neighbor and my God. And that's perfect. And I think you do that. Oh, goodness. C. Jones, you said future topic, maybe explain why 501c3 and why it's no good. Okay, I'm going to put that on there as a next week kind of thing. I don't mind doing that at all. I've talked about it before, but this way I can actually look into it a little deeper, and I can give you more on that. I can definitely talk about it. Katie Turner, you say you have an off-topic question. Enoch mentions that the fallen ones taught men the cutting of roots. We don't seem to have examples of eating roots in the Bible, which by itself doesn't mean it's wrong. But do you have any insight? Me, personally. Well, I guess my insight just comes from personal views and opinions. So I'll put it on the topic list for real short, as a short one. Cutting of roots in the book of Enoch. Okay, let's talk about it briefly, since you said it's a change of topic. So the cutting of roots in the book of Enoch, I think I do remember that, Katie, without bringing it up in front of me. I guess I could try to do that. Let's see. Let's do this. Book of Enoch. Where do you talk about roots, Enoch? Where? There it is, chapter 7. Okay, let's see here. All the others, together with them, took unto themselves wives. Of course, it's talking about the watchers, the fallen angels. And each chose for himself one and began to go in unto them and defile themselves with them. And they taught them charms and enchantments, the cutting of roots, and made them acquainted with plants. And they became pregnant, and they bare great giants, etc., etc. All right. I guess, Katie, like my interpretation of this has always been, to this point, that in terms of charms and enchantments and a cutting of roots and plants, this had to do with what we would call witchcraft. Okay? You know witchcraft enough to know that it's all about herbs and plants and materials being used to make essentially charms and enchantments and spells. And so this is what I have always felt is the proper interpretation of that. That people didn't do that until the angels taught them how. Okay? And there's other parts. Let's see. I'm not sure which writing it's in. It may be the book of Jubilees. I don't want to misspeak, but it's probably Jubilees or possibly Jasher. And it's after the flood, Noah's sons and his family start to become sick because of demonic activity. The demons after the flood start incurring disease on Noah and his sons. And so God sends an angel in this writing, and I apologize, I'm not going to remember specifically which it is. God sends he sends angels to Noah's sons to teach them the ways of using plants to cure disease. Okay? And so it's interesting that happened too, according to that writing. So that's something else to be aware of. But I think that that's the interpretation. And in regards to the discussion about trees, no, I don't think that that's what this is talking about. And I discussed that the no trees on flat Earth video a while back, so I think y'all know my views on that at this point. But yeah, that's what I think this part's about in chapter 7 of Enoch. I think it's literally about enchantment and spell casting, sorcery, so to speak. All right, so let's jump back to our list and go to the next. Karen Morgan, do I think dreams and visions are in the prophetic is in our season? Let's see if I can get it on the screen without, there we go, being clipped. All right. So yeah, this is yours, Karen Morgan, and so I wanted to answer this. Visions and dreams and the prophetic in our season. So the question sounds simple, but it brings a lot of things to mind when I think about this. Dreams and visions. I do want to call our attention to Zechariah 13, and I think we'll do that first. And this, by the way, if you read all of Zechariah, let me go to it. Let's see, Zechariah 13. So if you read all of Zechariah, what you'll realize, especially in the chapters leading up to this one in 13, is there's a lot of very striking parallels between Zechariah's prophecies and the first century. He talks about Christ coming. He talks about the rod of iron. He talks about the judgment. He talks about Jerusalem, all this other stuff, and it all matches. So that's one thing to be aware of, is the context of Zechariah is 70 AD is what's going to happen at that time period with Christ and Jerusalem. And he says in chapter 13, he says there will be a fountain open to the house of David. He would cut off the idols out of the land. They would no more be remembered. And where were the idols? They were under the temple. They were under the temple in hidden rooms underground. And it would come to pass at that time. And that, because of the context, we know what time it's talking about. That when any would yet prophesy after, meaning if anyone after the time of 70 AD and that judgment would prophesy, then his father and mother that begat him would say, "You will not live, for you speak lies in the name of the Lord. And his father and his mother that begat him shall thrust him through when he prophesieth." And it goes on, actually, saying the prophets would be ashamed after that day, and there would be no prophets, etc., etc., and they would hide, so they would not be killed, because they knew that all prophecy had ceased at that point. And that's what it talks about. Now, just realize when you're thinking about the book of Revelation, a lot of people go straight there and they're like, but there was Revelation. Yeah, that was before the time period this was talking about, that Revelation was written. So at the time of Christ's judgment, 70 AD-ish, that prophecy would stop, because he fulfilled the things the prophets had come to talk about, for the most part. And so this passage is seminal to this discussion of prophecy. Now, Karen, if you're listening, now that doesn't mean I don't think people have visions and dreams that are prophetic now. And so here's the thing. Prophets in the time of the Bible, prophets were a specific breed of person for a specific purpose, right? They had gotten a word from God. I hate saying it that way. I shouldn't say that. They'd gotten information from God that they were supposed to deliver to a certain people at a certain time in a certain place. So you had Jeremiah and Ezekiel and all Isaiah going to the Israelites in Babylon and telling them to turn from their wicked ways, right? Come back. And all of that led up to Christ, right? All of it. And all the prophets in the Old Testament. They were all like that. Specific people. They even did specific things, and this passage in Zechariah talks about it. They marked their hands as a prophet, and they would mark their forehead. And that sounds a little interesting too, doesn't it? Your hands and your forehead marked. It reminds you of the mark of the beast in Revelation 13, right? Not that prophets are of the beast, nothing like that. But there's a spirituality to that act, marking on the hands and the head. Anyway, for a specific purpose, for a specific object of worship. But the prophets did that stuff. They were very specific. They would, of course, just like John the Baptist, they would wear camel's hair and, would fast and eat locusts and all this other stuff. So there was a thing that prophets were. And what this is saying in this passage is that after the time of the judgment at 70 AD in Jerusalem, that type of thing, type of person would not be anymore. They wouldn't have any more of those. But I don't think that means that no one's ever going to dream a dream that God gives them as a vision of what may be to come. And the thing that I think is the key between the two is that you're not supposed to go out and tell everybody as if you were a prophet. Because as this passage states, there's nobody like that God's going to send anymore. He's not going to send anyone like this anymore, ever again. And so I personally would simply warn you, if you have had visions or dreams, which I have, like I had a vision in a dream. It was so real. It was like a, what do they call it? A lucid dream almost, where you're experiencing the thing and you're there and you're aware. I had this vision of the world being essentially destroyed around me and then rebuilt. And I've really never told anyone about that vision, that dream. But it's something that I've filed away in my little file in my head that I think about from time to time. Maybe it was something God gave to me, so I would understand something about what may be happening in the future. I'm not trying to prophesy to you. I'm just telling you, like, I think those things occur and those things are real. And I don't think you should deny that those things happen, but you should be careful. Because, by the way, the dream state is the playground of spirits. And they interact with you, and they talk to you, they show you things. I have specific dreams where I know that demonic activity was involved. And a lot of times when I come out of dreams like that, and I write them down. And I wrote a dream down just the other day. It was very interesting. But yeah, I believe that God does still show people things, but I don't believe He wants prophets to go out preaching and prophesying what they've seen in any sense like the prophets of the Old Testament. And who of the modern time have you ever seen that can prophesy the way that the men of the Old Testament did? Do you have like the book of Ezekiel? Have you gotten 60 chapters worth of information that you're going to share with people or as a prophet? I mean, that's coherent and all related? No. What I see from people today that consider themselves prophets is that they get little blips. Like, oh, I got to say this thing. Oh, I want to say this thing. And it doesn't really connect together. It doesn't, it's not related. It's nothing like what was in the Old Testament. So I hope that answers the question, Karen, that you had about dreams and visions. I do think they're legitimate. Sometimes you have to test them, but I don't think anyone comes out and is getting prophetic stuff like the prophets in the Old Testament. I think that's over with and done away with by God himself. And yeah, Terry Barnes, Kim Clement. I have heard Kim Clement, some of his stuff, and I've heard him prophesy things for the next month, the next week, the next 2 months, and none of it has ever come true. None of it has ever come true. Kim Clement, I can't say anything except that I don't see anything he's saying coming true. So why would I listen to Kim Clement? I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not angry. I'm sort of angry because I think Kim Clement and guys like him are capitalizing on people's sensibilities for interest, for popularity. I think that that's what he's doing. I'm sorry. I just don't. I'm not going to get on that train. It's not helpful for me. It doesn't give me anything. And then when he makes prophecies, predictions that do not come true again and again and again and again, I have to say, well, that's not for me. I'm going to go my way. So, Terry, you say you wish you had dreams of prophecies. Instead, you get aliens singing "Jesus Loves You." That's great. Well, I would say that's strange, but maybe it means something. But, yeah, I don't know. That's funny, Terry. That's really funny. B. Nichols, welcome this morning. It's good to have you. You say Kim Clement, such a common name among believers in your area. Yeah. I hear a lot of noise about him, but man, makes me so mad. I don't know. Let me put it this way. I think if you look at the prophets of today, like Kim Clement, here's the thing I don't understand. Now, just bear with me here. What value, measurable value, do you get out of listening to these prophets? That's what I have to ask every person who says these prophets are real. They're real. They're good. What value do you get out of listening to their prophecies? Prophecies, by the way, are about the future. It's something's going to happen. Generally, and it's a warning so that you will change your ways before that thing, and it always happens. It always comes true. Or else, in the Old Testament, you get burned at the stake or stoned to death, right? So you have to measure the value you're getting out of those people, and you have to be scientific about it. Is it truly producing value in my life, or is it constantly making me fear things? Or is it constantly making me worry or have false hope? What is it doing for you that's so valuable that you're like, oh, I have to have that voice in my life? I'm just saying, if I ever saw any of the people that support these prophets give me clear answers to that question, I would, for one, be impressed. And then for number two, might consider the prophet they're talking about if they could demonstrate value out of the prophecies. And I don't see it, and I haven't heard anyone do that, and therefore Kim Clement and his like are not valuable to me, and I will not listen to them. Yeah, Kim Clement prophesied about Trump, and that's part of what I'm talking about. Like when all that was really hyped, and I think it was, what year was it? 2019, 2020, maybe 2021. I don't know. There was a summer I remember where, man, everyone was like, something's going to happen next month. And Kim Clement came out. He was the same. Something's happening next month. I'm telling you, God's going to turn the whole thing upside down. And nothing happened that month. Nothing. So I'm just... that to me is as valueless as all the other voices on Twitter and Telegram and Instagram and TikTok and everything else. All the ones saying this thing's coming, it's happening, this thing's happening, this thing's happening, this thing's happening. None of those people know, including Kim Clement. And And Mark Taylor, now, isn't Mark Taylor the Trump prophet? He's the Trump prophet, right? I read some of his stuff, and wow, I just felt like it was useless to me as well. I mean, some of the things about the fact that I think Trump is fighting a war, okay? I think that's true. There's a lot of that's happening, and it's in the background. There's some that we will never know about, probably. There's some that we will know about at some point, hopefully. But the people that talk about that stuff, they're like, oh, next month is the bomb drop, right? Next month is the thing. And they're always wrong. So they don't know. See, that's what... do you get this? They say they know. They tell you the thing. You take their information and you test it, and it fails. Do you keep listening to the person, right? If the answer is yes, then I think you have a problem. You have a problem in why you're listening to a person that's consistently wrong time and time again. What is it that's so valuable to you about that? You have to evaluate that. You have to be the one in charge of your own emotions and desires and sensibilities on who is valuable to listen to and who is not. I mean, that's why I value you guys so much. You know, you place value in what I bring to the table, and that's why we're here this week, right? So that to me is a big responsibility. It's something I take seriously. And so I try not to be dogmatic about things I don't know. I try to be honest with you guys about what I see, what I don't see, what is there, what I feel is truth. But I think that provides value to you guys in ways that those other things can't do. And so I just, those other people rather. So I just want you guys to be the kind of people that are very careful and analytical, and you think hard about these people and what they do and what you are getting from them. Be aware of your own emotions in the situation. So that's all I'll say there. I think I'm on a soapbox a little bit, so I'm going to step back down. Get another drink of coffee here. I just think we need the last thing I'll say is I think we got to shift from thinking that other people have all the answers, from thinking that the experts are the ones that know everything, to realizing that you are just like all the experts. The only difference between you and understanding truth is work and knowledge and learning, and that will never stop happening. That will never stop happening once you get in the right mindset about things. You will refine what you know over time, and it's what I try to do with what I'm working on. But thinking that the answers are in some person out there somewhere that you need to listen to, I think is a dangerous place to be in. It's more about, well, there are people out there who are studying just like me, some of them with a huge audience. Maybe they're studying, maybe they're not, but you have to evaluate them as a person right beside yourself who has the same tool sets you do to learn. They have nothing more important or more spectacular or secret than you do. So your job is to discern whether they're using good information and whether you can find better information. And if it's valuable to you to listen to them, yay. If it's not, you need to get out. So, okay, that's it. That's all I'm saying on that. All right. What's our next topica? Let's see. Squiffy Bear, who is the disciple that Jesus loved? Let's ask the search engine first. Let's put it on the screen. Okay, I just want to search for it because it'll give me context. That's all. Just to find the passage, really. Matthew 17. Disciple Jesus loved. Matthew 17. Okay. Well, it's interesting that we're back in Matthew. Yes. Matthew 17. Loved Well, that doesn't seem right. Hang on. Oh, here we go. John 21:7. All right. Jesus loved. This passage, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples of the Sea of Tiberias. What happened in the last? This is the raising of Lazarus, looks like. No, wait. Oh, no, this is after his resurrection. Okay, this is after his resurrection. This is Mary at the tomb, etc. So that's the resurrection. After 8 days, his disciples were within. Thomas was with them. And then Jesus came in, the doors being shut, stood in their midst. And he did many other signs. These are written, blah, blah, blah. And after these things, so this is well after his resurrection, he showed himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias. And on the wise showed he himself. There was Simon Peter, Thomas, Nathanael, sons of Zebedee, and 2 other of his disciples. Interesting. Simon Peter said, I go a-fishing. They said to him, we also go with thee. They went forth, entered the ship immediately, and that night they caught nothing. And the morning was come. Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples didn't know it was him. He said, children, do you have any meat? They answered, no. And he said, cast on the right side of the ship, and you will find. They did, and they couldn't draw it in. It was so big. So they got the fish. Therefore, the disciple that Jesus loved said unto Peter, it is the Lord. Now, when Simon Peter heard it was the Lord, he girt his fisher's coat. That's really hard. You know what? I'm tempted to take this to next week because, Squiffy, it'll give me a chance to see. I didn't realize it was so ambiguous in the scripture. I thought it was John, right? I thought it was John, and so what does it actually mean? John would call himself. If I'm missing the passage and it's a different passage, then let me know. But I'm not seeing. I'm not seeing it. Because in this passage we were looking at, it just says the disciple that Jesus loved said to Peter, which it's not Peter, so is it Thomas or is it Nathanael? It could have been Nathanael, honestly. It could have been the sons of Zebedee. That's John and James, right? And the 2 other disciples. So it's very interesting. I think I'll put it off, Squiffy Bear, if you don't mind, and look at it a little. See if I can find out some more hints, some more information on this. Because, yeah, I always heard it was John, like you said, B. Nichols. And that's confusing to me that it's not so straightforward as I thought it was. As you baffled, yeah. That's great. I'm going to put John 21:7 down here in my notes. John 21:7. And we will move that to next week. I think that would be good. And Sam Big, you asked, could it be Paul? He's not mentioned in the passage, but it says the 2 other, which I don't know. And you said there is another passage, Squiffy. Well, I'll just do it next week. I think that'll be the best thing. So let me just do that. I'll take it for next week. Yeah. If you do find it and stick it in the chat, maybe I'll be able to grab it, put it in my notes here. Okay, so now we're doing Rafa Sieber's my take on AI. AI. Whew. AI. All right. So this is an interesting topic. And I'm turning off the screen because I don't think I'm going to show any material on this. I don't know how many of you know this. Some of you know this, but I work in software and I work in a technical field. So I know a lot about what the buzz of AI in the field and what's happening right now. So how do I explain AI to you? Because a lot of people, I think, see AI as a very magical thing. People that aren't technical or don't work in the technical field kind of see AI as this really amazing thing that's just totally different than anything we've ever had before. And I really don't, as a software engineer, I don't see it that way. I don't see it as this massively radically different thing than what we've always done with software computer code. Although it's bigger, I will say it's bigger in scope, perhaps. It combines a lot of things that have been done in the past in a new way, maybe. Maybe that's a way to say it. In the end, AI is ifs and thens. And I talk to people a lot about software. It's like, all software is, like, my grandma could understand it. If you saw the code that I see all the time, you would understand it. It's if this, then that. If this, then that. It's logic decisions. It's just decisions that are written by a person. And so the computer follows the decisions the person wrote into it. And AI is nothing more than a conglomeration of lots of that, a ton of it. Of course, its intent is to build a system that uses the decisions that are pre-baked to start to build its own decision tree. So you're teaching the system, essentially, quote, teaching. You're not teaching anything. You're essentially writing a system that writes its own code to answer questions. That's what that's what you're doing with AI. Are the systems big? Yes. Do they require a lot of data storage? Yes, a lot, because they are written to just gather information. You can, quote, train them by feeding them information. In fact, I know some people personally that are working with this right now. They are using AI models, which is, of course, code. It's just code that's written to build essentially what's built inside of a AI model is a neural type network. It's an associative network of information. So, most data, by the way, in software is like a spreadsheet, like in Excel. It's just columns and rows, right? And while the data storage for AI can be like that, it gets a little bigger and uses sometimes other types of data storage. But in general, it stores not just rows of data, but associations between things in a very somewhat complex way. They call it a neural net. But it's an associative way of storing information so that when you ask a question, it knows, well, I'm going to go to this topic. I'm going to see what spans off that topic, and then it finds the leaves that apply to what has been asked, and then it follows the track through the data, just like your mind would, a logic path from associative topic to a topic until it gets an answer. So in that regard, I guess what I would say is that in general, AI is not any kind of magical thing. It's simply a larger, grander scale of ones and zeros and logic gates. If this happens, then do this. If this, then that. And we train it to make those decisions. Now, the problem, I think, where it comes to a little bit of kind of a scary thing is when we start allowing a system to grow like that and make decisions and the scope of power we give that decision making. It's less about the fact that it does that thing, but the fact that we give it the ability to control so much. So if we did, for instance, let's say Google decided we're going to make an AI model as the back end of our search engine now, which it's probably partially there already. But let's say they made ChatGPT the search engine for Google. So what happens now is that ChatGPT now answers the questions of almost every person in the world that goes to the internet. And because of that, you've given the system power that it probably shouldn't have. It will, by its own whatever mechanism it used to come up with the answers that it has, it will then drive human perception based on its answers. That's the problem with AI. It's not the gears that are turning inside the system of AI to make answers to questions and to do things. It's what power do we give it? What do we just, take and hand over to it to do that is just, it's crazy to do that with. And that's where it becomes problematic. I mean, I personally could, for instance, program a robot dog to kill humans, okay? So that's not, even AI is not required for that. Like, I could do that in my spare time. Program a robot dog to find and kill humans. But when we have AI involved, and you've built systems that make decisions arbitrarily based on data, and then you attach it to a robot dog that for some reason decides it's okay to kill humans, and then it programs a robot dog to go kill humans door to door because for some reason it senses that that's the right thing to do. That's where the problem comes in, right? And I don't know that that's ever going to happen, but that's the thing. It's once you apply the technology, what's the outcome? It's the application of the technology that's problematic. Now, in response to Rafa, your question, you mentioned demons. And so I'm going to add that. Because a lot of people do say, hey, is it demons? Is AI demons? Is it possessed? Here's an interesting thing. When nobody's making the decisions anymore, no human is involved in the decision making anymore, then who drives the decision making? I mean, from what I've told you, it's really based on the way that humans write the code is what drives how it decides things. But once you have done that and the system learns and then it starts doing its own thing, is there a point at which decision making can then be driven by an outside force? That's an interesting question. Can that decision making then be driven by perhaps demonic activity or satanic activity? I mean, my first response to that question is I don't think so. However, I would not rule out the possibility. And where that really is interesting to me is when you start talking about quantum computers, okay? And I almost don't like saying the word quantum because people have all these preconceptions of what quantum is. But I did some research a while back into the D-Wave quantum computer company and what they, were saying about their product, what it did, how it computed. And it did sound like whether it's true or not, and then that's something that's totally up to speculation, they hide this technology like it's gold, right? They don't show anyone really what it does, but the way they talk about it makes it sound like it's, in their mind, dimensional technology, that the way that the quantum computer processors work has to do with theory on quantum physics where you've got multiple instances of truth at the same time, multiple they would call it dimensions, although I wouldn't necessarily call it dimensions in the way that we think of like the spiritual dimension. But let's assume that they were able to somehow tap into spirit in the way that they are quantum computing inside their processors. At that point, I think all bets are off. It's, to me, plausible then, if that's truly what's happening, perhaps they tear a rip in the fabric between this dimension and the spiritual, and then somehow there is spirituality involved in the computing process. Now, if you combine that with AI, that's where, to me, things get a little hairy. Again, what drives the AI? What drives it? What tells it what to do? That's where things get a little hairy. And whereas I don't now see that it's close, I think there's a potential for this kind of thing. I think there's a potential. And it does worry me a little bit. Let me catch up with you guys' chats a little bit. I see some things flying by here. Sam Big, you say AI has been great so far. It's helped me in lots of areas of my business, not to mention the man image generation, which is mind-blowing. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. AI is interesting for sure. B. Nichols, that's different. You're talking about cessationism. Okay, I'll take a look at that. Rafa, you said you heard a guy from a Google whistleblower saying they already lost control of the algorithm. They don't understand it anymore. They've lost control already. The IFS and thens became too complex. It became too complex. Yeah, that's interesting. But I mean, in the end, all they have to do is pull the plug, right? Just turn it off. I see. That's what I don't understand. It's like, are they fear mongering, or are they? What do they mean, lost control? Is it running their company? I don't know what that means. Maybe, but Terry Barnes, you mean CERN. You mentioned CERN. And yeah, I don't know what to think of CERN, although I don't think they're doing what they say they're doing there. I also don't subscribe to the Anthony Patch theories of dimensional shifts and rifts and demonic activity there. I don't know that that's it, although it might be spiritual activity. I don't know exactly, but perhaps there's something to that, but they're definitely not measuring particles there. That's just ridiculous. Again, I've seen a really amazing documentary of people that work at CERN, and I was amazed at how stupid these people were. Just dumb. I mean, really dumb. And they really didn't have much that they did each day. It's kind of like a lazy job. They would just go monitor a screen for a while and take notes and then go home each day. And it was really amazing. It was a BBC documentary on CERN. I think it's called Inside CERN, if I'm not mistaken, if you want to look that up. LG, it's good to see you there. Ma'am, it's so good to have you this morning. Appreciate you joining. And you say demon-possessed programmers. Yeah, well, that's true. If the programmers are demon-possessed, then they will intentionally start an AI process and a model. They'll build a model that bends towards the wrong, bends towards evil. That wouldn't surprise me one bit. I mean, and that's a good question. LG, thank you, by the way. That brings up an interesting thing, and that is, do you trust the people that built your AI? But you could say that about any software, any hardware. Do you trust Microsoft, right? Most people run everything they do on Microsoft. Do you trust that? Anyway, yeah, thank you, LG. It's so good to have you. By the way, LG, I don't want to get a chance to talk with you, so I want to stop 1 second and just say I'm so proud of you and what you're doing on your channel that you host every day. You are so faithful, and you are an encouragement and an inspiration to me. Thank you so much, ma'am. God bless you. Just had to say it. Oh gosh, you guys are so cool. I love you guys so much. You guys are awesome. All right, well, I hope that gives you my perspective on AI. I do think it can be used for evil, and I do think it could be used for non-evil. But it does open some possibilities that are troubling, for sure. I do think there are some people out there who are working to make AI safe also. So we'll see how that all plays out. But in the end, I think we'll still always be able to pull the plug. So just keep that in mind. All right. The last topic of the day. And this is my little bonus topic. Bonus topic from Bible Scribe. Albert Pike and his plan for the 3 world wars. So let me get that up for you, and we're just gonna look through this because I think it was amazing to me when I read this. I finally read it. I don't know if I'd ever read straight through the whole thing before, or maybe I think I did, but I didn't, of course, have the context of the modern day, which I felt like, man, it kind of matches. So that's where I was with this, and that's why I wanted to at least mention it to you guys before we finish up today. So Albert Pike's plan for the Third World War. Let's see, I think I put it in this document for my notes. Yep. So I just wanted to read this and maybe comment on it as we go. But if you know Albert Pike, he wrote a book called Morals and Dogmas. He was a dyed-in-the-wool 33-degree Mason, Satanist, Luciferian. And I think he died in the early 20th century, if I'm not mistaken. But he wrote this in, what was it? 1871. He wrote this in a letter to Mazzini, August 15th, 1871. So that being said, here's where it comes down. I was just amazed at how this reads, how it plays out. But think about this and think about it in light of the current context of today. The Third World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences caused by the agentur of the Illuminati between the political Zionists and the leaders of the Islamic world. Amazing. Is that not what we're seeing kind of happening right in front of our face right now? The political Zionists and the Islamic world. The war must be conducted in such a way that the Islam and political Zionism mutually destroy each other. Meanwhile, other nations, once more divided on the issue, will be constrained to fight to the point of complete physical, moral, spiritual, and economical exhaustion. That's exactly, by the way, before I read this. This is exactly what I have been thinking about the current conflict in Israel and Gaza. I felt like, of course, with all the lies coming out about what's happening there, it felt like it was a draw. It was intended as a draw to get multiple NATO countries involved in this conflict, specifically targeting the United States. And so I felt like they were trying to draw us in. And that would make sense in regards to this statement. Other nations, once divided on this issue, divided, are we not divided? Do you not see across the spectrum of chatter on Israel versus the Palestinians? You do see division? That's what I see on almost every side. Complete division. Other nations divided on the issue will be constrained to fight to the point of physical, moral, spiritual, and economic exhaustion. We're almost, in America, we're almost completely economically exhausted already. So we're getting there. We shall unleash the nihilists and atheists. Read BLM. Read Color Revolution. Read it, because that's what it's talking about. And we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm, which in all its horror will clearly show to the nations the effect of absolute atheism, origin of savagery, and of the most bloody turmoil. Then everywhere, citizens obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries will exterminate those destroyers of civilization, and the multitude, disillusioned with Christianity. I see this happening now too, guys, disillusioned with Christianity, whose deistic spirits will from that moment be without compass or direction, anxious for an ideal, but without knowing where to render its adoration. They will receive the true light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer, brought finally out into public view. Does that not ring true? Because I see even Christians being disillusioned right now. You know, that's the thing. It's like every piece of this was feeling like some of it was falling into place right now. Christians in general, Christianity is disillusioned with itself. We were talking earlier about the church, right? We're talking about our disillusionment with the church, our, disgust with the hollowness of the current modern Christian church. Well, could it be that that was directed, that was intended, that was fomented, encouraged, that disillusionment? So that at the point of the crux of crisis, that they can inject Luciferian worldview into the public. So they break down everything with revolution, with chaos, with war. And then at the lowest point, everyone's upset with every religion that they've got. And then they bring in Luciferianism as the solution. They might not call it that, right? But that's what I think they're going to try to do. This manifestation will result from the general reactionary movement which will follow the destruction of Christianity and Christianity and atheism, both conquered and exterminated at the same time. I just thought that was a little too resonant to let go and not share it with you guys. It's just a little too much. It's just something to think about, and I think it bears, if that's the first time you've heard it, I would say maybe go back and read it again and think about it, and then consider it as the events in front of us continue to play out on the world stage. Because part of what, honestly, part of why I'm doing what I'm doing right now on this live stream and on this channel is because of this disillusionment of Christianity. I saw Christianity in the past few years. I've seen it going just all crazy. People just don't know what to believe. Some of them are latching on to portions of Gnosticism and Satanism and Luciferianism and all this other stuff. Just ideas creeping in that are just off base, wrong. And people in the end are going to give up on it if they're not given an anchor. And I'm trying to help God give his anchor. I'm trying to carry God's anchor out and give it to you guys to hold on to. Or just people in general, because I do see what they're talking about here. I see it happening. I see the intent. Now, all we can hope is that, being, doing what I'm doing and us in general trying to counteract that with knowledge, with evidential knowledge of the scriptures and of God and of the things we talk about, I think is crucial in this time. And some awareness, right? And so I just, this is one of the things I fight against. I fight against disillusionment within the Christian community. I want us to know what we know, believe who God is, believe in him and his son, and not waver from that. Because it's not worth wavering from. It's truth. And it has changed my life in so many ways at so many points in history. And I know that because of you guys' testimony, it's the same with you. You felt God's hand in your life many, many times. And I want us to have the anchor that we need to move through this time period. It's gonna be rough, I think. It's gonna be a little rough, even for Christians, for good Christians who know what they're talking about. So anyway, that's it. I wanted to share that because I thought it was so pertinent to our current situation. And I appreciate you guys affording me the opportunity to read that with you and go over it. But Katie Turner, you say no one's reading their Bible. I think that's definitely true. Because you lose the anchor, when you stray away from that. And everyone's listening to people, right? Whether it's Kim Clement or this person or that person or who knows who. Even Andy Stanley. Oh, that's horrible. If you're just listening to that guy, oh my gosh, you're probably vaccinated and you're probably, on your deathbed. So, I mean, I don't know. It's, there's so much, but we do need to stand on the word and realize that there's nobody out there that's got really more information than you do or more ability to find information than you. Oh my goodness, Katie Turner, Jordan Peterson. What was it that I saw of him this week that was just so wrong? So wrong. It probably had something to do with the Israel conflict, but Laura Masood, you say, isn't it funny that their god Lucifer is their last resort, not the first, even for them? Yeah. Well, it plays right along with the fact that, if Lucifer is the embodiment of Satan, that's what I say. If Lucifer is the embodiment of Satan, then you are essentially tethering yourself to the father of lies and intending to, somehow at the end of your whole dastardly plan, you plan to come out on top when you are subservient to the father of lies. No, he's lying to you and he's lying to everybody else. I just don't. Where's the logic in that? Where's the brains in the people that follow that? I just don't get it. And yes, Squiffy, if you would like to put a prayer request on the table, please do it. I'm going to now start our end here. Thank you guys for the time, and God bless all of you. But yes, Squiffy, please let me know your prayer request. Let us all know before we leave today. I want to hear it. Because as always, I would encourage you all to pray for one another. I mean, we're here every week together. It's the least we can do is say a prayer for those on the chat. Oh, goodness. Yeah, I need to do more praying. I think that it's sometimes I'm good about it, sometimes I'm not so good about it. So I need to get back on the good. Start praying a little harder for some of you guys. But oh, I see, Squiffy. I think I read it wrong. Your mom has been diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I'm very sorry to hear that, Squiffy. I'm very sorry to hear that. We will pray for that. Well, guys, it's been a pleasure this morning. I thank you so much for your time. Please do pray for Squiffy Bear's mother. And in general, there's things that all of us could probably say as far as requests. Please pray for each other. Have a great week and try to stay strong. It's a weird, rough time. Just keep your eyes and ears open. God bless all you guys. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.